I am Coach Kochek, and I specialize in helping people tell their stories and express their thoughts, feelings, ambitions, and emotions in a captivating way. Today, I want to talk about how to create a writing routine that actually works. And I'm going to give you 7 strategies that you can use to do that. I know when we say writing routine, it sounds so routine. It sounds so typical. And a lot of times, what most of us can find, especially if we are creatives, when we seek to put together a routine, sometimes the putting together a routine can actually be more daunting than the actual writing itself. So I'm going to simplify it in the best way that I can. And I want to preface this by saying I have not conquered this myself, that I am still seeking a routine that works for me, specifically because my personality, I like routine, but at the same time, I like spontaneity, especially when it comes to creativity. So know that the seven strategies that I'm going to give you are, you can personalize them to fit you. So the first one is to identify your peak writing and your peak creative times. So if you are reading other people's routines, especially really successful writers or really successful creators, and they say, well, I wake up at 5 a.m. and I create and I write. And it sounds really great. And if you try to implement that same strategy without really understanding what your peak times are, sometimes we can take on other people's times of highest peak performance that works for them without really taking into account what works for us. So what are your peak writing times? Do you find that writing really early in the morning is a time that works for you? Do you find that writing late at night, in the afternoon? Where in your schedule do you find that you can get the most out of your writing time? And this might take some experimentation. I remember when I wrote my first book, I'm not really a night person. Like I'm a middle of the dayer. I don't know if there's like an actual phrase for that. I like the 10 a.m., 8 p.m. time. But I found that when I wrote my first book, all of my writing took place in the middle of the night. And when I mean the middle of the night, I mean I woke up at 3 a.m., like wide awake and just created. But that is usually not my peak time. So I have found for me, writing for myself, obviously I write all the time for other people, but writing for myself, I do best when it is early in the morning and I haven't started my tasks and I'm not filled with all the exterior noise and I can just create. So I have to try to pad that into my schedule in the morning. So know when is your peak time? When do you find that writing comes easier for you and you feel like you can get in your zone, your flow, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, getting in your flow. So what time of day does that happen? Not only that, but during your peak time, how long are you going to write for? So determine that. Put a deadline on it. So maybe you say, I'm committing to myself to write for 30 minutes, right? A routine is simply setting something out that you are putting a goal to. Now, sometimes you might not hit it always, but it is a set goal that you can attain to even if you always don't hit it. So are you going to write for 30 minutes? Is 30 minutes too long? Or are you just going to write for 15? And maybe when you get in your zone, it's like, okay, I hit 15. So now I'm choosing to go over it just because I'm in the flow. So know when your peak time is and then set that time. How long am I going to write? Maybe how much? Maybe you don't want to do time period. Maybe you're going to do a word count. Today during my peak writing time, I'm committing every day to write 500 words or 750 words. Or you can do pages, 3 pages double space. So have a numeric amount for what you're going to write, and then have that set goal every single day that you stick to. Once again, the beauty is you can go over it. So if you're in the flow and you're just like, man, I said 3 pages, but I'm in it, so I might go 7 pages. I might just go while I'm in it. The point is, it is the power of movement. A lot of times we get so caught up in the actual just showing up and starting that if we give ourselves small attainable goals, like writing goals every single day, it creates momentum within us, and it makes us not always feel like we're a failure. So maybe in your experimentation, you can say, this week I'm going to wake up at a certain time, and in my morning routine, I am committing to myself that at 8 a.m., I am going to sit down to write from 8 a.m. to 8:30, and I'm committing to writing 250 to 500 words, or just say 250 or say 500 words. And that's going to be my minimum. If I want to go over that, that's fine, but I'm committing myself to do that as my minimum. So know when your peak time is, and when you establish that peak time, put some goals in place. The second thing that you can do is mentally prepare. So I'm going to talk about mentally and physically preparing. So number 2 is mentally prepare yourself. Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of times when we go into the creative process, we think that we can just sit down and thus flows our genius, right? But just like with anything, like if you even think about when you go to the gym, like it's unwise for you to go straight into the gym and just jump into the workout because your body's not warmed up, you're not ready. It's the same thing with the creative process. So what are you going to do to warm up the creative parts of your body before you sit down to actually jump into the writing? So this can be different in many, this can be different for many different people, right? So I'm really ascribed to the idea that writing is a spiritual process, which means to fully invest your mind, body, and soul in the process and not just the logical part. I suggest doing some sort of spiritual practice. That can be meditation, that can be prayer, that can be affirmations that you say. It can just be silence, which is along the lines with meditation. But I know sometimes people do guided meditation, but maybe you're just choosing to do something like transcendental meditation where you're just completely silent. And the goal is just to get your mind clear of the noise. So the goal of the mental preparation is just, how do I get into a space where I'm clearing out all of the junk that might get in the way of my flow, which once again, we talked a lot about 2 weeks ago when we talked about getting into your flow. So that's the mental preparation of your routine. Just like if I have an exercise routine, I have an established warm-up routine. What is your mental warm-up routine going to be at your peak time? So I sit down at my peak time to start writing. Maybe before I do a meditation, or I do a prayer. And in my prayer, I'm saying, like, just take away all the negative thoughts, the insecurities, the thoughts that could get in my way from really creating. Help me not to overthink. Let the ideas flow purely. Let this be a sacred moment. Whatever you need to do to get in the right mental space to just flow. The second thing is the physical preparation, right? So where you have your space, your physical writing space, should be a comfortable space for you. So if I've prepared my mind and I'm ready to flow, and I'm uncluttering my mind, but I'm sitting in a very cluttered, physically cluttered space, it's almost like now I've created this paradox for my writing space. So just like you are clearing your mind and making it a space where your ideas can flow, do the same for where you are for your physical space. So for me, like my home has to be clean before I create. And that's just me. Like everything, I have to have a clean environment. When I sit down at my desk, and I like to sit at my desk, I'm sitting at my desk right now. I'm in front of a window, which is natural light, which I love. I have my candle here next to my computers, the pictures, like family pictures of my dad. And I have my books next to me. So everything that I have in my space is a comfortable space for me. Like I like to set the physical mood of my creativity. And it's the same thing, like even when I have music on, like I don't put on like really loud and like movement music. I like to put on calming like piano music. But some people are different. Some people might want like really high energy, fast music. It just depends on what works best for you. And once again, that might be some experimentation on your part, but get into a space where you're comfortable. Do you like to sit in like super comfy chairs? Do you have a favorite chair? Do you want to light candles? Do you like experimenting with different scents? Music, like I just said, lighting is important. I like natural light, so I don't want a lot of light. Like even room temperature. Like, you don't want to be creating and like all of a sudden realize that like you're working in a sauna. That could definitely interrupt your flow. So make sure that when you're getting ready for your routine, that you have your space already cleared out. So especially when you're creating a daily routine, sometimes it helps to make sure that the night before you make sure that that physical space is clear. So if I know I'm getting up and at 8 a.m. I am coming to my writing space to start writing, before I go to bed, I'm going to like take a look at it and make sure, do I have everything? Is my laptop in place? Is my plug there? Are my glasses next to my laptop? Do I have my notes next to me? So that way, once again, I'm not cluttering my mental space as well, because I don't want to like get ready for my creative flow and have to clean up a bunch of stuff and stress about my space. So a routine, sometimes the beauty of a routine is that you can prepare for it the night before, even before you sit down. Now let's talk about the actual writing. So we've set our peak time, we've set our goals, we've mentally prepared ourselves, we've physically prepared ourselves, and now we're at the computer. Our hands are on the keyboard and we're ready to create. What kind of routines can help us consistently get in the flow? So I actually talked about this last week when I was answering the question, where do I start? Every time before you sit down to write, you should have an idea of the writing that you are going to tackle that day. Unless you are dedicating yourself to just free writing every day, like if your goal is to just write, just flow, and you're not writing for anything, like if it's just journal writing, then this is going to be a little bit different. But if you know that you're sitting down to write for a specific goal, like if you're creating an article, if you are writing a book, if you're writing a blog, like if you have a specific purpose, when you sit down every day, you should have an outline already prepared for that day. So before you sit down and when you're getting ready to write, you should have an idea of what is your topic that you're going to be writing on that day, who is your audience, what is the emotion word that you're going to be using, how do you want them to feel, what are the pain points of your audience, and all of this is covered in last week's Where Do I Start? So it's really important that you have that outline so you already know what you're sitting down to write, because you don't want to spend the first 15 minutes of your writing just typing one word and deleting, one word and deleting. And trust me, I've been there. I'll write full paragraphs and then stare at it and say, I don't like it, and delete it. So and that's going to happen either way. Even if you have an outline prepared, there are just going to be times where you're just going to frustrate yourself in the creative process. But to minimize that, be as clear as you can about what specifically are you going to be writing about that day. So get clear with, even with clients that are writing full books, a lot of times after a coaching call, we'll get clear with what they're working on. So the next time you sit down to write, what are you working on? What section? What are we focusing on? How is that going to look? So that when they sit down to write, it can be purposeful. You want to make sure that your routine is making writing more, you want to make that relationship closer, if that makes sense. So the routine essentially makes writing more of a familiar habit, instead of just sitting down every time, just whenever, and you're creating whenever. It can be very frustrating. But when you're starting to create this consistent routine, it becomes easier and the creative process is less strenuous. So it's important that you have some form of outline or an understanding of what specifically am I tackling today. The next thing I want to talk about as you're writing is I want you to embrace imperfection. And what do I mean by that? A lot of times in our routine, we become locked into this idea that every word that I write has to be and sound perfect. And if it doesn't, I have failed, and I'm a terrible writer, and I'm never going to do this right, and my 8th grade teacher was right, and I'm the worst. And then we walk away from our writing routine worse off than when we got there. The problem with this is that the beauty of art and the beauty of producing something that flows from the soul is that there is this raw imperfection to it. Because as humans, that's what we relate to. I don't relate to perfect. I'll never relate to perfect because nothing in my life mirrors that. Everything in my life mirrors imperfection. And the same with you. So when we are requiring perfection from ourselves, or when we feel that every single word has to be perfect and has to flow out in the right way, we put so much pressure on ourselves, and it makes us not want to show up for our routine because we feel like we got to come at 100%. And trust me, some days when you write, you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, I can't believe that came from me. That's amazing. Like, I was so in my flow and it was so great. Some days it's going to feel like that. And then other days you're going to look back and you're going to say, that's trash. I don't like that. And neither of those responses are essentially wrong. It's just getting in your flow. And it is understanding that there's beauty in imperfection. And sometimes here is the crazy part of the idea of imperfection. Sometimes the things that we believe are the most imperfect are what resonates with people the most. I think sometimes when I write and I'll be in it and I'll post it or I'll share it, and in my mind I'll think, I don't like it. I don't feel connected to it. I don't even know what I was saying. And it's usually those that I put out that people most resonate with, and I get the most comments. And I'm like, art is subjective. The beauty of what you're producing is subjective. Your only assignment is to be the carrier of the truth that's inside of you and to translate it out into the world and let it do what it will. So embrace the beauty of imperfection within your routine and within your writing. And then number 6 is share your writing. Share it. Now, how you share it is totally up to you. Maybe you have specific friends that you know are going to, tell you the truth about your writing, give you great feedback, or they're going to encourage you. You want to get people that are going to offer a wide spectrum on your writing. You don't just want someone that's going to trash everything you do. I think people that do that don't understand the beauty of creation, right? The beauty of creating something. But you want to share it because the amazing thing is that when you write something, it becomes so much more encouraging when people engage with your writing, because that's the point. Like, that's the beauty of it, is that you're writing something that has a truth to it. You're writing something that has the power to change the way someone feels, the way someone thinks, the way someone believes. So when you are able to share that, whether it be on a small scale, like you share it with family or you share it with friends, or if you share it on a larger scale, like you share it on social media, or you share it on the internet, or you share it in a book that you publish. The point is through the journey of writing and creating, share it with somebody. Ask them what they took away from it. What did they really like? What could you have made clearer? That also becomes the beauty of going and showing up for your writing routine every time, because as you're sharing it and you're getting feedback, it's almost like your audience, your ideal audience, is giving you feedback for what do they really want to hear. So then we're answering those questions that we need to answer when we're starting out in our outline. We're answering questions about what does our audience really value and what do they want to hear. So share your writing on a regular basis. And it also takes away some of the fear that a lot of us have of sharing it on a larger scale. Start just sharing it on a smaller scale and build your confidence with just watching people positively engage with your content. And number 7, probably the most important out of all 7 of these, if I were to say one is the most important, which is just showing up. It sounds so base level because it is base level, but it's so important. If you make it a consistent point just to show up, it makes such a difference. Consistency is more powerful than people believe. We always want like some specific fast-tracked formula, Like, how do I get this done in 10 days? Or how do I get it done in 30 days? You can get a full book done in a week if you wanted to. The difficult part is creating something that matters and creating something that people want to hear and creating something that is transformational to yourself and to other people. The writing process is so much more than words and sentences and compound sentences and grammar and vocabulary. The writing process is transcendent, it is spiritual, it is transformational. And when you show up every single day to write, to create, whatever that may be and whatever that looks like, you will be amazed at what starts happening with you. And it's more than just building a writing career. It's more than just putting out content that goes viral. It's more than just creating a book that becomes a New York Times bestseller. All of those are byproducts, because the most important part of writing and the most important part of showing up is what it starts to do for you. Because imagine how your life will begin to transform if every day you are sitting down during your writing routine and you are allowing authentic truths to come from you, where you are allowing yourself to be vulnerable with yourself, with your authentic self every single day, and let that flow through the mode of writing. Imagine the changes that can happen inside of you. And I am a testament to that. I am here in my life where I'm at right now because of writing, because of the transformational nature of writing. And I've seen it happen in my clients over and over again, that this is so much more than just sitting in front of your computer and typing, that this is a life transformational experience. And when you show up every day, it makes a difference. So using these seven different strategies, create some form of routine that makes you accountable to what you said you wanted to do and makes you accountable to the powerful story that you have inside of you. Because I know on the other side of the screen are so many of you that have something to say, that have a story to share, whatever that looks like. So don't keep it locked up inside of you. It might take a week, it might take months, it might take years for it to come out. But the only way that it is going to come out is if you show up every day and establish a routine that holds you accountable to releasing that story inside of you. So I encourage you, whatever that looks like for you as you get to know yourself as a writer, start really formulating a routine. And these 7 strategies are a great place to start. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to all my fellow writers, creators, and those of you just passionate about sharing your story. This has been Unlocking the Writer Within. I will see you next week.